Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for joining the program today. We're very fortunate to have with us today an esteemed speaker, Professor Nahla Gharavi Nayini, who will be speaking to us on women's role in narrating the Holy Prophet's Hadiths. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And before we start the main program, we're going to have recitation of the Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا جاءك المنافقون قالوا نشهد إنك لرسول الله والله يعلم إنك لرسوله والله يشهد إن المنافقين لكاذبون. اتخذوا أيمانهم جنة فصدوا عن سبيل الله إنهم ساء ما كانوا يعملون. ذلك بأنهم آمنوا ثم كفروا فطبع على قلوبهم فهم لا يفقهون. وإذا رأيتهم تعجبك أجسامهم وإن يقولوا تسمع لقولهم كأنهم خشب مسندة يحسبون كل صيحة عليهم هم العدو فاحذرهم قاتلهم الله أنى يؤفكون. وإذا قيل لهم تعالوا يستغفر لكم رسول الله لووا رؤوسهم ورأيتهم يصدون وهم مستكبرون. سواء عليهم أستغفرت لهم أم لم تستغفر لهم لن يغفر الله لهم إن الله لا يهدي القوم الفاسقين. هم الذين يقولون لا تنفقوا على من عند رسول الله حتى ينفضوا ولله خزائن السماوات والأرض ولكن المنافقين لا يفقهون. يقولون لئن رجعنا إلى المدينة ليخرجن الأعز منها الأذل ولله العزة ولرسوله وللمؤمنين ولكن المنافقين لا يعلمون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تلهكم أموالكم ولا أولادكم عن ذكر الله ومن يفعل ذلك فأولئك هم الخاسرون. وأنفقوا مما رزقناكم من قبل أن يأتي أحدكم الموت فيقول رب لولا أخرتني إلى أجل قريب فيقول رب لولا أخرتني إلى أجل قريب فأصدق وأكن من الصالحين ولن يؤخر الله نفسا إذا جاء أجلها والله خبير بما تعملون. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Thank you very much for that beautiful recitation. We are very fortunate today to have Professor Gharavi, Professor Nahla Gharavi Nayini with us. She did a master's in Quran and Hadith in 1365 and 1368 in the Islamic Hijra calendar, and she graduated from the Faculty of Theology and Islamic Sciences of Tehran University 4 years later, when she received a Ph.D. in Tarbiat Modarres University. She's currently a professor of Quran and Hadith Sciences at Tarbiat Modares University, and she's a member of the editorial board of several scientific and research journals, and a member of the board of directors of the Quran and Hadith Sciences Society of Iran. She has published 5 research titles and about 50 articles in journals and 20 papers presented at internal and international conferences, as well as to research projects. Today, she's going to be speaking to us on a really important topic, which is women's role in narrating the Holy Prophet ﷺ's hadith. Let's welcome us, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And just before we start, just a reminder for everyone who's watching on YouTube and those who are watching here on Zoom, if you would like to ask a question at the end of the talk, please feel free to put the questions on the chat, either on Zoom here or on Facebook or on YouTube, and inshallah we will try and ensure it gets answered. If you would like to ask live, please do join the Zoom chat. Thank you very much. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. With the candles of the death of Hazrat Zainab, which is going to be tomorrow. Good night, everybody. Inshallah, all of you is happy and healthy, and all your family. Thanks from Brother Mardad and all the group for the invitation of me for joining you in this meeting about talking about the transmitter of hadith of the Prophet sallallahu. As all of us knows that when the Islam started and the revelation came to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, the ignorant people were living in the Hijaz land, and mostly the situation of the ladies was so down, and there was no really inequality between the men and the women in that society. And mostly there was a time that the women there was no about any respect or valuability for the women, and mostly the women was in the very lower than second grade in the society. Besides that, the number of the ladies, we can say they have been the half part of the people in the society. But Allah Almighty, and with the revelation of the Quran and the prophecy of the Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it put up the position of the ladies in the society, and the Prophet taught the people that the ladies in the society are in the same equal as the position of the men in front in the view of Allah, and mostly just the difference between them, as the Quran say, is about the karamat and their virtue is more important. And that's either for many years, either still the people, as they were trying to collect the name of the people or writing something down, mostly we can see that the name of the ladies mostly was omitted. The reason which I wrote this book, it was, first of all, it was my thesis for my PhD degree. And the reason which I choose this title for my book was one day in my classes, one of my professors said that, for example, in the Sahih Bukhari, there is some transmission hadith from Hazrat Khadijah, the first wife of the Prophet. But the Bukhari, in his book of the Rijal, the list of the men who has transmitted the hadith, he didn't mention the name of the Khadijah. This sentence made the idea for me that it seems that it is necessary to collect the name of the ladies who were the transmitter of hadith of the Prophet and his household and his family, Ahl Bayt. So I suggested this topic and they accepted, the professors in the university accepted, and I started my researches for this idea. In that time, which I was either working on it, of course, there is a book, some books that they are very old ones, for example, from the second century, that Tabaqat al-Kubra, which is an important book, which is still we have in our Islamic lands or all areas. We see that, for example, that book was 8 volume. 7 volume of that book was has the talking about the companion of the Prophet, the Sahabis, that they are men, and just 1 volume belongs to the name of the ladies. Maybe also it is necessary that I say some idioms which is used in this book. For example, the word of the hadith, everybody knows about that. Of course, that is the transmitting of the speech or the deeds of the Prophet. And also there is some word in this book that the Sahabi is the one who was the companion of the Prophet, which was the Muslim, and during as he was, that person was Muslim, he or she met the Prophet, and mostly in as in an idiom, the Sahabi is the one who has met the Prophet, of course, more than one time, and has spent some time of his life with the Prophet in the mosque, in the city, and around of the Prophet, it means. So the word Sahabi and mostly the hadith which we are using in this talking is it. I thought it is more important to introduce it for everybody. So I decided to write it down about the ladies who had transmitted the hadith from the Prophet. That of course, such person, any men or women, that they are the Sahabi of the Prophet and they had transmitted the hadith from the Prophet in correct way, they had really the role of holding the messages of the Prophet, the laws and all the deed and the speeches of the Prophet to the next generation, to the society, and to the next generation and other generation after all descendants which they come in the between the among the Muslims. So they have a big role in the Islamic society mostly, that they were able to carry the sentences, the advice, and the laws, and all the deeds, and the sunnah of the Prophet, and or either the translation, the meaning of the ayat of the Quran Kareem to other people, to their family, to the other people, to next generation, and all descendants forever. So they have a big role in the Islamic societies, in the all societies in the world, because many people, either non-Muslim, they have some reading or idea about to know about the lessons and teachings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they are important. They are. We know that through the history, there have been many ladies who they were very high in, they are very been in high in understanding in the brave ladies and also educated ladies, understandable ladies, that they were living in these societies. But unfortunately, after the death of the Prophet, again, the system of Islamic society were going to go returning back to the ignorancy situation, to the Jahiliyyah. And they started again to push the ladies back and do not show them in the society and do not talk about them. But we have really, when we search on the books that which has been written in the third centuries, in the fourth centuries, as the Ibn Abdul Bar has wrote his book, and about all biography about the companion of the Prophet, or Ibn Asir in the 7th centuries, he wrote his book Ustul Qabe about the companion of the Prophet, or Ibn Hajar, who has Ibn Hajar Asqalani, who has written his book in the 8th centuries about the biography of the Sahabis of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We can see that really something more about 440 or more than that. There has been ladies which their name was mentioned in these three books. And mostly in each of these books, we can see that the most part of the volume of the book was related for the men, the companion of the men, which they have been around the Prophet, and very rare about the ladies. So it shows that really those who were write down about the societies, about the companions, many of them really didn't want to show the role of the women in the Islamic society, and for transmitting of the hadiths, for teaching or learning Quran, or teaching Quran, or being educated, or something like that. It was very rare number of the book during the history about the ladies. So showing the role of the women in the societies as they carrying the speeches of the Prophet, or either the meaning or the tafsir of the Quran Kareem. It is very important because the ladies, the women are the source of the society. The mother is the source of the family, that she has really the duty of teaching and turning and teaching, and also guiding her children in the family, and it's very important for the next generation of the society. So in that is because of that, I really decided to have the research about these ladies, and I tried to mostly I focused on those ladies who had most sincerity about the family of the Prophet, and they had what they were engaged with the family of the Prophet, and going to his house, or doing some serving of his family, or especially were trying to support the Prophet position, and his whole household family. I gathered some number of them. For example, the companion of in this group, which I wrote it down for the Prophet, were about 55 ladies, which I had some document about some of their hadiths, which they had transmitted it, or because of some their relation with the family of the Prophet, and also supporting the family of the Prophet, or either we can see the name of the ladies from the time of the Prophet, which either they had some job and working, and or they were supporting by financial support of her family, or also those ladies who were helping in the battlefield, and they were following with the Prophet and the armies to the battlefield, and helping them, or for some medication, for some taking care of them, or some preparing the food and something like this, helping the soldiers in the battlefield. There have been some ladies who that the Prophet led them to go with him for the battlefield. So all this report shows that really, as it was very become famous in the non-Muslim societies, that the Islam does not let the ladies have any activity, and they have to be hidden in the houses, in the one small room of the houses or the corner of the houses. Really, the history and the reports about the time of the Prophet shows that it is not the correct things that Islam talks about it. And among these ladies also, we can see that, for example, this book has started with the name of Fatima bint Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa Fatima Zahra, the daughter of the Prophet, with the name of Abiha, because I decided to start it with the put it under alphabet system, and because her name was Fatima or Zahra, I choose the Abiha, the mother of her father. With this nickname, I choose her biography be the first one, and started the book with her name. Of course, among those books which I mentioned them, and they were very ancient, like my book, Ibn Abdul Barr Qurtubi has started his book with the name of Abiha, of Hazrat Zahra Salamullah alayha. So in this book, I have found 55 ladies who were the companion of the Prophet, or something about, for example, 30 ladies who were the companion of Ali ibn Abi Talib, or some of the companion of the transmitter for the Fatima Salamullah alayha, which they have been about 6 ladies, 6 to 8 ladies, which we could find hadiths from Fatima by these ladies. And of course, Fatima Salamullah alayha, she herself was the transmitter of hadith of her father. And of course, the Hazrat Khadijah, the first wife of the Prophet, also was one of these ladies who is mentioned in this book, and also about all her effort and for the Islam, and for helping the Prophet and supporting the Prophet with her help and with her wealth, as she did during her life. In the comparing of those books, which I mentioned them, as I've mentioned, for example, 7 volume was about the name of the men. In that society, we can assume that at least 1/3 of the people in the society were the women. Or, for example, we can say the number of the companion of the Prophet among the ladies was 1/3, at least could be 1/3 of the number of the men. So what we can see that the book which has mentioned the 7 volume for the men, but 1 volume for the women, shows that really it is not the equal and justice for bringing their name. And the writing and collecting information about the ladies can show more to the Islamic society, to our youngs especially, that the ladies, Muslim ladies, since the time of the Prophet, they have been active in the way of the Islam and the way of the Quran, and in the way of the Prophet, to teach their children and their friends and their family the teach of Prophet and the teachers of the Quran and Karim. And then also I can say that either after the time of the Prophet, of his household, those special ladies who have been the mother of the infallible imams of this family, or Hazrat Zainab, the granddaughter of the Prophet, and her role in the history, we can really focus and understand that knowing about this family, that's about Hazrat Zahra and also about Hazrat Khadija or Hazrat Zainab, and also reminding the hadiths of the Prophet, which is mentioned by many of these ladies, is very important. One point, important things is that if we look to the Rijal books, that the books which is mentioned about the biography of those who have transmitted the hadith, especially we can see that there is no any um, accusing the ladies in this way, and none of those sources which has introduced some of the false men who made the false of the hadiths or transmitted hadiths in wrong way and in the with the false. There is no any name of the ladies, but there is many name. Some books introduce hundred of the men who were for making false, and they were not very trustable. But the ladies usually they have been trustable for their transmitting of the hadith, and this role also is very important. Either in our society in Iran after the Islamic Revolution, as the idea of our leader Imam Khomeini was to bring the ladies on their position and say about their roles in the society and how much they are important. The ladies are important and they can be active, and they can affect on the family, about for the family and the society. So showing the role of the ladies before Islamic Revolution, also in the Islamic societies, about the teaching of the Islamic lessons to the others and learning of the Islamic lessons is very important to see that how much during the history since the time of the Prophet until today, how many ladies they have been study the Islamic laws, Islamic rules, Quran Kareem, and also the hadiths, and also about the fiqh and all the Islamic philosophy, or either all branches of the Islamic studies. So it is shows that the ladies was not being back of the men, and they have been trying, especially in our centuries, they have trying to show that if there be possibility for them, they can reach to the higher levels of the education of Islamic laws, Islamic rules, and Islamic teaching. There have been some of the ladies either that they had been they had support, for example, the household of the Prophet in front of the Yazid Muawiyah and the Yazid ibn Muawiyah, or some of the rulers and the king and those who were came in the position of the Caliphate of Islam in the time of the Bani Umayyah or Bani Abbas. This kind of the men, there have been some ladies who were very brave and very stand on their position in front of those king rulers that they have been not just in society, and those ladies were supporting the position of the household of the family, like of the some of the companions of the Ali ibn Abi Talib, that we had called her their name as, for example, Arwa bint Haris, that she is Arwa was the granddaughter of Abdul Muttalib, or some of the ladies like the Asma bint Umais, or some ladies like Salame, the wife, one other wife of the Prophet, or some of either the daughters of the Prophet, Zainab or Kulsum or Ruqayya or Fatima Salamullah alayha. All of these, or they can be calculated as the transmitter of hadith of the Prophet. And some of these ladies, especially like the Salame or Asma bint Umais or Fazl, or some of the wife of the Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet, or Salma, the wife of the Hamza, the another uncle of the Prophet, or Fatima bint Asad, the wife of the Abu Talib, the uncle of the Prophet. They have been very pure ladies with a really deep understanding of Islam, and they have been sacrificed themselves in the way of the Islam and obeying Allah and the Prophet. And these ladies have been the symbol of the virtues and the big lesson for the Muslim ladies in every centuries. And it comes, this list of the ladies also in this book has come after that to the another centuries, those other ladies which have transmitted the hadiths from their generation before themselves, and we have calculated in this. The collected number of these ladies in this book has been something about more than about 210 ladies is mentioned in this book. That of course, at first I had found them by those books which I mentioned, but still after that, I tried to look to the book in time which I was doing my research. The computer system, the floppies, was new in the societies, and just I could find the name which it was famous to me, and I was familiar with them. But there has been some other names which was not familiar. So for finding those names, I tried to look to the sources of the hadith book, which they have been. Some of them was about 100 volume. I tried to look to the document of the hadith and look if I can find any new name. That alhamdulillah I could find about something about 15 late name of the new ladies which I added to the first publication of this book. And this one, which after that, my book was in Farsi. Then one of my American friends, with help some talking together, she had transmitted it to English translation, which it is alhamdulillah, it is not a bad translation. It's very good one too. I can say that mostly I talked about the book, and if you prefer, I prefer that if there is any question that I can answer about this book for some of the friends is as they like to know or have some question.
Thank you very much for your talk, Professor, and thank you for sharing an outline of the work that you've done. There have been a number of questions. Let me just ask, Ahmed, would you like to ask directly? Let's just give you the chance to do that if you want.
I can only do by audio, but not video.
Okay, please go ahead.
Assalamualaikum. They are just basic questions. In what language is your book published? And what is the name of your book, of the book?
The name of the book in Farsi or in English?
English.
In English, that is the women transmitters of hadith. That mostly they try to one group of the women transmitter, the Shia women transmitter of hadith.
It's published where?
Pardon me?
Where is it published?
It's published in Qom of Iran. In
Okay.
Qom.
Okay. How many women transmitted Prophet's traditions, and how many women were his companions?
Of the Prophet,
Only Prophet, yeah.
the number of the companion of the Prophet, of the ladies, in mostly those books which I mentioned, for example, in Astor-Qabe or of Ibn Asir or the book of Ibn Hajar, they are more than 400 ladies that
Wow.
but many of them, there is no, unfortunately for some of them, there was no any report about them, just their name and their family name. Of course, in my book, I tried to to introduce them with their family name, their father's name and family name, and their mother's name, as much as I could find those. And if they had married, who was their husband, the first husband, sometimes second or third one, how many children they have. And also in this book, I try to talk about them, to introduce them about the degree of their virtue and how they were, and how many hadiths they had transmitted, and brought 2 or 3 examples of their hadiths to show it. And also I try to show that from who they had transmitted, and also who had transmitted hadith from them. In the Farsi one, I separated this with the title, but in English, in English translation, it didn't. It is not separated. It came together because they transmitted the American ladies that they were living in Iran. They have been my friend, and they said that in this model it is not very common for the normal people, because in the transmission they try to bring it as the other people can read it and be familiar with that. But the first the research, because it was the university thesis, I tried to separate the title for the personality, the family situation, and also about their hadiths that they had transmitted, also from whom they had transmitted, or also how many people had transmitted hadith from that lady. That it is also very important. For example, we have about Hazrat Zainab, the granddaughter of the Prophet. We have that she, for example, has transmitted hadith from Ayman, one of the ladies who were servant of the Prophet, or she has transmitted hadith from her mother, Hazrat Zahra, or she has transmitted hadith from Asma bint Umays, which Asma sometimes was the wife of the Ali ibn Abi Talib. So the Zainab has a chance to transmit hadith from her. So in the system of the transmission, this is important, that one person which is transmitting hadith, from whom she is transmitting, or either how many people transmitted hadith from her. But of course, with those sources, which we have, the books of the hadiths, I could find, for example, how many person has been transmitted hadith from Zainab, that I can say that, for example, either 6 person like Jabir ibn Abdullah Ansari, one of the companion of the Prophet, he had also transmitted hadith from Zainab, and Zainab alayhi salam has transmitted hadith from her mother Fatima alayhi salam, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Asma bint Umas, by Ayman, 4 person. Of course, Zainab has transmitted hadith from her brothers Hassan and Hussein too, but I couldn't find any source that it will be mentioned that she has said something sentences about them. That is the problem. That mostly from the ladies, it was not being reported and saved and recorded from them their hadiths and their sentences, and that's why we do not have many biographies and many information about the ladies, and finding about them and collecting the hadiths which they had transmitted was really too many work. Of course, this day, as we have the internet informations of all the libraries and things, it is very easier than the time which I collected those hadiths and those informations.
Just a final question, if you don't mind. Here go the names of the famous women companions of the Prophet and transmitters. Just a few, only a few names. Do you have any famous ones? The
The
Prophets
most
only.
The most famous one is Salame, that she is one of those who has many hadiths. Asma bint Umays, that she has either many hadiths, and these ladies are very trustable ladies that all Muslims they accept the transmission of the hadiths. And of course, Fatima Salam alayha has not too many because her all it was not, it was just she passed away a few months after the prophet, but some other ladies in different field of the Islamic knowledge, they had the transmission from the prophet. Aslam, also Ayman, also was those who had transmitted hadith from the prophet. Hazrat Khadija, very rare number hadith we have from that she had transmitted from the Prophet, because nobody was going to write it down or record of her. That is very, it was very important that it was not being written down. That is our problem. Of
But
course,
weren't there many traditions from Hazrat Aisha as well?
Of course, the Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, she has the majority hadiths. But unfortunately, there are some hadiths, the false hadiths, which is mentioned with the name of the Aisha, and it should be recognized, because and sometimes those who were making the false hadith, they were trying to bring it with the name of the Aisha, that the society of that the people of the hadith accepted it better than. Of course, when, for example, when you are going to transmit some sentence from the Prophet, if you say that I am saying from the tongue of the Aisha, we accepted you very easily, than better than anybody else. But if you say, for example, I am transmitting from my father or my relatives, we usually the people of the people of the hadith does not accept that, and say that how much his father could be trustable. But because the Aisha was trustable, either sometimes those times that some people try to make the false hadiths, they sometimes brought with the name of her, but it was not her hadiths. But of course, the hadiths among the ladies, the Aisha's hadiths are more than anybody else. Yes.
Thank you very much. A couple of other questions which have come through. Firstly, is a lot of your work also able to be looked at through Mu'jam al-Rijal from Ayatollah Khoy? Are a lot of the women transmitters all documented in Ayatollah Khoy's work as well?
Yes, there are some of these ladies in the Ma'jam al-Rijal, but one of the name which was in the introduction of this book, I has mentioned also that some other reason which why I try to do research in this way, because either all the books of the Rijal which we have, either among the any field of the مذهب اسلامی we have the number of the ladies was not as much as it should be. For example, either in the book of the Ma'jam al-Rajal Ayatollah Khoyi, there is not this number of the ladies 100, 210 which I collected. There is not in his book. And, especially, and also there is one name in the book of Ayatollah Khoyi, which this name he was mentioned in the name of the man, but in the hadith, when we look in the source of the hadith, we can find that that person, for example, was the women, and it was not the name men, but her name was a special one, which is mentioned in the introduction of this book.
That's really interesting. Thank you. Do you have a reason as to why you think that some of these women narrators were not included within Ayatollah Khoi's Ma'jam al-Rajal? Was it just a mistake, or do you think something else was happening?
No, mostly Ayatollah Khoi, the name of the ladies, those researchers on that book, they took it from the sources of Shia's Rajal book that which has been written before. For example, Rajal Sheikh Tusi or Najashi. For example, in Najashi book, there is just 3 or 4 names of the ladies, just. Of all these names, the 200 which I found, there has been just 4, something like about 4. Or in the book of the Sheikh Tusi, Rajal Tusi, the name of the companion ladies of the Prophet are something about 38 ladies. But for the Prophet, I found 55 in this group. So it shows that they take from those books which was before them and the sources which they had. But as I tried to look to all sources of Shias or all Sunnis brother books, all the Rijal of Tahzib Ibn Hajar and other, I tried to look to all of those books especially, and then bring them out, their name out, and search more about them, then bring it in this group.
Thank you very much. That's very good. One question from YouTube, from Rida Jichi. Thank you very much for your question. The question says, "Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Professor, for that very insightful talk. Any indicators on whether the lady companions who narrated hadith from the Prophet kept written records of hadith?"
They themselves mostly, you do not have report that they had recorded by themselves, they wrote it down. But for example, Aisha, Sayyida Aisha was educated. She knows, she had a copy of the Quran by herself, for herself, a sahifa for herself, and she could write it down. Some of the ladies had learned to write it down, but we do not have any report that they wrote it down, especially that after the death of the Prophet, the writing down, as we have the report by Suyuti and many of others, Zahabi and all others, that for 1 year in that society, writing down of the hadith was prohibited. And especially the time of the first caliph and the second caliph and the third caliph, especially it was prohibited to write the hadith down. And they had been, their proof was, they were saying that you may increase the number of the hadiths of the Prophet. And it is exactly mentioned in the Suyuti book, Tadrib al-Rawi, that for 1 century, the sunnah of the Prophet was not written, been down. And that is a bad document which non-Muslim, the mustashriqin, what do you call it in English? Right now I forget. Those who were studying in the Islamic knowledge and the Prophet, and they have been not Muslim by themselves studying, they made this document as a joke for the Muslim Sunnah and Hadith of the Prophet, and saying that, okay, that's source teaches which was not being written down, how could be trustable? And that is, they are right. If really this report be correct, everybody can understand it. If for 1 century the knowledge of the people be not be writing down, we know the writing down of every knowledge is the best source for saving that knowledge. And we can see that no, this report is not really correct. In my all teaching and understanding from the sources, we can find we have some document or some like Khatib Baghdadi or some others of the scholars of Islamic scholars, they shows that really it is not true, and it was not prohibited by the Prophet, and the Prophet was encouraging people to write it down what he said.
Thank you very much. Another question's come through. Out of the list of 400 women who you've found out, do you know what their trustworthiness is? Have they been assessed to be thiqa or trustworthy, or are they mostly majhul and unknown?
There is, as I mentioned, that there is no any note, any book to bring the name of the ladies under the list of untrusted. They are, so it means that the ladies were trustable in their transmitting. And either mostly either the situation of being untrustable because of the politics, because of some benefit, a personal benefit of during the life of the history. It was there has been many different way that those who caused the false hadiths, they had some reason for that, some politics situation for saving a position, some for the money, or some because of their memory, they couldn't have good memory and save it, or either they have been not severe and fearing from Allah to transmitting the hadith in the correct way. They have to correct to save it and transmit it in the correct way. They were not fearing from Allah, so it happened that the false hadiths appeared among the hadiths of the Prophet.
Thank you very much. We've got a question here on Zoom from Jamil. Jamil, would you like to ask directly? Jamil, would you like to go off mute?
Jamil Khashim.
No? Otherwise I can ask on your behalf. All right, I will ask on your behalf. Jamil, the question is, when you speak about Zainab transmitting the hadith from Bibi Fatima... Oh, sorry, Jamil, you want to ask your question directly? Sorry.
Yes. Sorry, I muted my... Yes, thank you very much for the talk. When you mentioned that that Bibi Zainab also, you have some hadiths from her, was it... I mean, how old was Bibi Zainab in any case when Bibi Fatima passed away? So that's a question in my mind, because you said that she obviously narrated the hadiths that she heard herself from her mother. So how old would she have been when these things happened? When her mother passed away?
This family, as their understanding and their ability was not same as the normal people as we are, as we say that, for example, a child about 2, 3, 4 years cannot save something and say, but we can see, hopefully, I have a daughter that she's about 36 years old. She remembers many things since she was, for example, 3 years old. And she sometimes talked to me about that things, that something which happened, or some sentences which her grandmother or grandfather has told her, and still she remembers those. It depends to the person. We cannot compare them with ourselves. But for Zainab Salamullah alayha, she heard from her mother. She was living many years with her father. She was living many years with her brothers, Hassan and Hussein. Also, she was in touch with the Fizze. Fizze was with her after the Fatima Salamullah alayha. Fizze was with Zainab. Ayman, which was the servant of the Prophet, she was either with the Zainab, as the Zainab Salamullah alayha grown up. These ladies was with her, and they could bring either if we imagine that she was not able to remember or understand about the sentences of her mother, she could directly took some sentences of her mother by Fizza or by Ayman.
So how many hadiths have you mentioned in your books that Zainab has said directly of her mother? Is it just a handful, or are there many?
No, they are not. They are not many. Just very few numbers. They are really few numbers, and mostly I tried because this book was my thesis. I should bring all the ladies in the same model, for example. So I said in the introduction that, for example, about 2 or 3 hadiths I am going to bring from her, each ladies, not more than that. Besides that, many of them had many hadiths. So I didn't bring, but just I tried to give the references of the hadiths. From Zainab, Salamullah alayha, directly from her mother, I do not have any in my book, but from the other sources, I found that she has transmitted. See, I used either the Rejal books. So, for example, the Tanqih al-Maqal Mamaqani, or either Mu'jam al-Rijal al-Khoyi or Rijal al-Tusi or others, I took the name of those who she has learned the hadiths from them. I took from those books. Same as the mother of the infallible Imams. For example, the mother of Imam Baqir or Imam Sadiq, any of those ladies. We do not have in most Rijal book at all their name. Just in the book, Rijal book of Tanqih al-Maqal Mamaqani, their name was mentioned as they have been the transmitter of hadith. And surely because they have been the mother of, for example, of Imam, and they have been the wife of the Imam which was before, she surely has been mentioned some sentences from her husband or her son. But no, you cannot find any of those sentences in any of the book. But Mamaqani in his Rijal book has mentioned the name of those ladies. For example, the mother of Imam Reza, the Najm Khatun, the mother of Narjis Khatun, Imam Zaman, and all these ladies, he has mentioned them. And just mostly I try to make it more talking about these ladies, because really there wasn't any sources of strong books we can find any information about those ladies. Unfortunately, it was the situation of the Islamic society on their time, that their name shouldn't be mentioned anywhere, and either no any sentences be saved. But still they have some ladies like Hakimi Khatun, which she was, or the mother of the wife of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far, which they have been holding some secret of the imamat, which like Zainab Salamullah alayha or Fatima.
Thank you very much. It actually confuses me more, because you say to me that for the first 22 years, they couldn't write any hadith. And then you say that ladies wouldn't even say their names because they weren't allowed to say anything like that. So how would you gather all of this information if they weren't allowed to write all these things down and the ladies couldn't put their names down to it?
It is the report of in this all this, I can say the Sunni's book is mentioned like Subhi Saleh or Suyuti and like Zahabi, and they say that it was more. Zahabi say 1.5 centuries, 1.5 centuries that passed after the Prophet, and then they were not allowed to write the hadiths down. But I have the document in another my book, the history of the hadiths of the Shia. I have another book that I've written, and it is long, many years that I am teaching it in university for master degree, that I have document and I show that from Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib and his followers and his children, they had been writing down. And exactly we have this sentence from the Prophet, Ya Ali, uktub ma umli alayk. We have this, alhamdulillah, this hadith either in some sources of the Sunnis brothers, that the Prophet said to the Ali, write it down. Ali was the first one who was writing it down. And also Suyuti says that the Ali and his son Hassan were those who were not stopping people from writing down, prohibiting the writing down. They have make it halal and let it be done. So it continued in the followers and in the Sahabis of the Ali, and we have many documents from the Sahabis like Abu Rafi and his sons, as Jabir ibn Abdullah, Salman, and also many of them that they had some books which they took many hadiths from the Prophet and the Ali. So in this way, by continuing of the companion of the Imams, each after each other, the sources of the Islam of the Prophet were being saved. Either we have many hadiths, for example, the Imam Babur says that I transmit from my father, from his father, and Abi and Awahi and Rasulullah. So as they say this is continuation of the sanad of the document of the hadith, and it is a very strong document.
Thank you very much, Jamil. The final question before we end is, do you think that this type of discussion is also being done within the Hawza or only at universities such as Tehran University?
Both. It could be active, of course, in Hausa mostly because of their teaching before was about the fiqh. Then they had added the sources of teaching the Quran mostly, but about the document and the sanad of the hadith, some of the ulamas work on it because usually it is hard. Either in university, also the students, when they want to do their researches, their thesis, mostly they prefer do not work too much about the hadiths and the rijal because it's really needs patience and needs a lot of searching and bringing the document close to each other. Of course, these days it is very easier than my time, really, with computers and with all CDs. And
so in the Hawza, they do teach about women narrators of hadith a lot.
Not too much, really. In the universities, it's much because this branches of Quran and Hadith is one strong branch of studying Islamic study.
Thank you so much, Professor, for your time. I know it's very late there in Tehran, and it's so, it's really an honor for us to have you speak and be able to speak so late and be awake so late for all of us. So thank you so very much for joining us. It's really an honor for all of us.
You're welcome. Thank you very much of your invitation. It was very nice for me. It's okay. It's not late. It's all right. Of course, tonight is the night of the 15th of Rajab, and it is one of those nights that we have to be seated and inshallah do some prayer. Iltimas dua of all of you. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. And just before we end, a couple of quick announcements. Next week on Friday, we have Qari Sayyid Jalal Masoumi, who'll be speaking to us about Quranic recitations and melodies, where it all comes from. The Thursday after, we have Sheikh Jafar Ladak, who'll be speaking to us about Mi'raj. And on the Friday, the 12th of March, we have Usman Bugaji, who will be speaking to us about Islamic education in Africa today, the history and contemporary challenges. The Wednesday after, we have Sheikh Muhammad Hilli. The Tuesday after, sorry, we'll have Sheikh Muhammad Hilli, who will be speaking to us about the wiladat of the third Imam, Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And then on Friday, the 19th of March, we have Sheikh Mahmoud Dala, who will be speaking to us about a glimpse into the Sahifa Sajadiyah and the place and power of supplication. So looking forward to the future talk. So thank you all very much for joining. Those on Facebook, those who are joining on YouTube, and those who've joined here on Zoom. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam.